If you want to understand how modern armies lose to disciplined formations, study Isandlwana. In 1879, the British Empire marched into southern Africa, confident in its technology. Rifles, artillery, drilled infantry formations, red-coated soldiers representing the most powerful empire on earth. Facing them was the Zulu kingdom, armed primarily with spears and shields. The British believed the outcome was predictable. On the 22nd of January, 1879, that assumption collapsed. The Anglo-Zulu War began as part of British expansion into southern Africa. The British High Commissioner issued ultimatums designed to provoke conflict. When the Zulu king Cetshwayo did not comply fully with British demands, invasion followed. British columns advanced into Zululand. One of those columns, commanded by Lord Chelmsford, established a camp near a distinctive hill called Isandlwana. The camp was not fortified. British officers did not believe it necessary. They underestimated both Zulu mobility and Zulu doctrine. The Zulu army that approached Isandlwana numbered roughly 20,000 warriors. They were not an unorganized mass. They were structured under a system refined over decades by King Shaka earlier in the century. Their core tactical formation was known as the Horns of the Buffalo. It was an encirclement maneuver. The central force, the chest, engaged the enemy frontally. Two flanking divisions, the horns, moved outward and then inward, sweeping around the enemy's sides. A reserve, the loins, remained behind, reinforcing where needed. This was not chaos. It was geometry. On the morning of January 22, British forces at the camp were divided. Lord Chelmsford had taken part of the column away, believing the main Zulu army was elsewhere. The camp at Isandlwana was left exposed with roughly 1,700 British and colonial troops. When Zulu scouts were discovered, engagement became inevitable. The Zulu chest advanced first. British infantry formed firing lines and opened disciplined volleys with Martini Henry rifles. At distance, the firepower advantage was clear. Zulu warriors fell in significant numbers, but the Zulu advance did not collapse. The chest absorbed the pressure. Meanwhile, the horns moved. Using the terrain for concealment, Zulu flanking forces extended outward beyond the British line of sight. The British, focused on the frontal assault, did not fully appreciate the scale of the maneuver until it was nearly complete. British ammunition distribution began to strain under sustained fire. Supply wagons were not optimally positioned. Communication between units deteriorated as the battle expanded across open ground. The Zulu horns closed inward. The British line, already stretched thin and extended forward from camp, found its flanks exposed. Once encirclement began, modern rifles lost part of their advantage. The British firing line depended on formation, integrity, and controlled volleys. Encirclement fractured that system. Close-quarters combat followed. Zulu warriors carried the Ikawa, a short stabbing spear designed for aggressive engagement. Large cowhide shields allowed rapid advance under fire. The objective was not prolonged skirmish. It was collapse. As British formations attempted to withdraw toward the camp, the Zulu encirclement tightened. Units became isolated. Officers fell. Cohesion dissolved. The battle transitioned from ranged exchange to desperate melee. By late afternoon, organized resistance ceased. Approximately 1,300 British and colonial troops were killed. It was one of the most devastating defeats the British Empire ever suffered at the hands of an indigenous force. The Zulu losses were significant, likely in the thousands, but the strategic shock reverberated through the empire. How did this happen? It was not a miracle. It was structure. The Zulu military system emphasized discipline, endurance, and coordinated maneuver. Warriors trained to move as units, not individuals. They marched long distances rapidly. They executed flanking maneuvers with precision. British commanders underestimated this capacity. Technology is force multiplier, but it does not replace positioning. At Isandlwana, British firepower inflicted heavy casualties, but once the encirclement matured, rifles could not fire in all directions simultaneously. Ammunition resupply faltered. Tactical depth became liability. The Zulu horns did what they were designed to do. They eliminated retreat. Encirclement is among the oldest battlefield principles. From Hannibal at Cannae to steppe cavalry across Eurasia, the lesson repeats. If an army cannot maneuver freely, its advantages shrink rapidly. The British had artillery, they had repeating rifles, they had imperial confidence. What they did not have was secure flanks. The psychological impact in Britain was immediate. Newspapers reported the scale of the loss with disbelief. The idea that a technologically advanced imperial force could be overwhelmed by warriors, armed largely with traditional weapons, challenged prevailing assumptions. Reinforcements followed. The war did not end at Isandlwana. British forces regrouped, fortified positions more carefully, and eventually defeated the Zulu kingdom at later engagements, including Ulundi. But Isandlwana remains a case study in overconfidence. It demonstrates that discipline and maneuver can offset technological disparity. It demonstrates that dismissing an opponent's structure invites catastrophe. The Zulu army did not defeat the British through randomness. They applied a system: chest, horns, reserve, engage, encircle, collapse. In military history, certain battles become symbols. Isandlwana is one of them. Not because it ended an empire, but because it exposed a vulnerability. Modernity does not guarantee superiority. Firepower does not replace formation awareness. And an army that believes itself untouchable often discovers otherwise at the edge of its perimeter. If you study enough battlefields, you begin to see the repetition. Numbers matter, weapons matter, but positioning decides outcomes. Isandlwana was not an accident. It was an encirclement executed against an opponent who believed the rules no longer applied to him. Follow for more war doctrine, battlefield systems, and the patterns that shape history.